So, here's what happened. The Germans build this super ship with the express purpose of effing around. And they immediately find out. What did they find out? It's not just the United States that gets all ape strong and stunned when somebody touches their boats. I'm the Doug Moore, and today we're discussing the World War II battleship, the Bismarck, its brutal sinking of the HMS Hood, and how the Royal Navy launched an unhinged, all-out search, calling ships from every corner of the Atlantic to hunt, engage, and sink the Bismarck. But first, if you want to understand the battleship, the Bismarck, you need to understand a bit about the interwar period as it relates to warship building. Post-World War I was a weird time globally. Nobody trusted anybody because the role of villains of the 20th century hadn't really been cast yet. Everybody was kind of looking for the next anarchist buying a sandwich that was going to plunge our world into World War again. So to prevent that, in 1922, the winning team from World War I got together in Washington, D.C. and decided the best way to prevent said next world war was to limit the size and power of the world's largest navies. At this time, the five mentioned are the world's biggest powers. Germany is still totally screwed from losing World War I, and Russia is otherwise occupied. So these five powers got together to prevent World War the sequel.
But you didn't.
Known as the Washington Naval Treaty or the Five Powers Treaty, the agreement these five countries signed limited the tonnage and armament of new ships being built. It also put this really strange ratio in place where for every 5 capital ships, battleships, battle cruisers, the United States and Britain could build, Japan could build 3, and France and Italy could build 1 2/3. I don't know how you sail 2/3 of a ship, but it's got to be better than being 3/5 of a person. Historical fractions, am I right? As mentioned, Germany was not a part of this treaty, being the sorry losers from World War I. They were bound by another treaty, the Treaty of Versailles, which put extreme limitations on how much iron Germany was allowed to make float and put guns on. Specifically, it limited Germany to battleships of 10,000 tons of displacement and no more than 6 of them. It also outlawed all German submarines, which seriously pissed off the German people. They cannot get enough of the Wiener-shaped boats. And just for comparison, the Washington Five, which I think is a better name for the 5 countries that signed the Washington Naval Agreement, so that's what I'm gonna start calling them going forward, the Washington Five. The Washington Five were allowed to build capital ships up to 35,000 tons of displacement. So basically, Germany was the kid who always tried to cheat, so he gets the controller with the sloppy stick. Anyway, while viewed as wildly unfair within Germany, this treaty would keep the German Navy out of contention for supremacy or even competition, really, you know, if war were declared. Then the British did what they consistently did with the Germans in the 1930s. Like a parent losing a battle in the candy aisle, the Brits just rewarded bad behavior like their tea depended on it in exchange for promises of better behavior in the future. And what really drives me crazy about the interwar period in Europe is that Britain was with Germany, and everybody knew it. Specifically, France knew it. They were like, hey, could we not let them do this again? And nobody did anything really. All I'm saying is that if Canada ever, at any time, got half as froggy as the Germans did in the 1930s, no more Canada. It's not even a question. Look what we did when the Soviets tried to take a nuclear holiday in Cuba. We almost ended the entire planet. Sorry, where was I? Yeah, appeasement. So in 1935, Britain signs an agreement to formally remove the Treaty of Versailles limitations on shipbuilding and puts in place a 100 to 35,000 ton of displacement ratio between the Royal Navy and the Reichsmarine. And they are still the Reichsmarine at this point. They'll be the Kriegsmarine soon, but not yet. You're welcome for that clarification. And as with all Anglo-German relations at this time, Germany's already doing the thing that Britain was compromising for.
It's just good business.
I.e. building ships that were too large. But to be fair, they claim they were building ships that were too big because France was breaking the treaty and building ships that were too big. And in a few years, Japan's gonna pull out of the whole darn thing and the whole treaty's gonna go tits up anyway. So it doesn't really matter. Long story short, short story long, the Germans are allowed to build ships to the Washington Five's 35,000 ton limit, and immediately in 1935, they begin to lay down the keel for Das Oberschiff. The first of 2 massive battleships, the Bismarck was laid down in Hamburg in 1935 and launched in 1938.
coming in at 823 feet. That's 1/6 of a mile for those who don't like to use feet. She had a beam of 118 feet wide. Not only was she dimensionally large, but she was not put together like other ships of the day. A complex, more compartmentalized interior layout gave her incredible structural strength. This led to an incredibly stable firing platform. Speaking of which, the Bismarck was rolling heavy with 8 15-inch guns arranged in 4 2-gun turrets. It also had a 15-inch thick solid steel armor belt, and thanks to a 3-screw steam turbine propulsion system, she could pull over 30 knots.
Which for her size was pretty fast, which speaking of her size, she was huge. 45, 50,000 tons of displacement. I can't be completely sure because there's no consensus even among scholarly works, and I don't know if this is because of Germans obscuring the reality when the ship was being built, or maybe it's dry weight versus not dry weight. I have no idea. But the ship was big, it had guns, it had many of them, and those guns were big too. The Bismarck, with heavy cruiser Prince Eugen and a number of smaller ships, quietly slip out of port in Denmark on exercise Rhine. The goal? Make steam through the Denmark Straits, slip past those sleepy Brits at Scapa Flow, bust into the Atlantic, and go absolute Hamburg on Allied commerce shipping, something that the Bismarck and her convoy were uniquely capable of doing. If the Bismarck is able to slip into open water in the Atlantic, she will be unstoppable. Thankfully, 2 days later on May 20th, 1941, a neutral Swedish ship spots the convoy, understands what's going on, and wouldn't you know, that information somehow made it to Admiral John Tovey, commander of the Royal Navy's home fleet at Scapa Flow. Now, Tovey, and the entire Admiralty for that matter, had had an absolute hard-on for the Bismarck since they attended her inauguration a few years earlier. So as soon as they got the news that Bismarck was on the move towards the Atlantic, Tovey immediately launches an interception convoy headed off by the brand new Washington 5 compliant Prince of Wales and the flagship and pride of the Royal Navy, the HMS Hood. Built in 1920 before the naval restrictions, the HMS Hood displaces 45,000 tons, and it cannot be overstated how much this ship means to the Royal Navy and the British people. This boat is a symbol of national pride. During the interwar period, the British would sail the Hood along with the HMS and Repulse around the world to kind of just, you know, remind everybody who the British Navy is and to keep their goddamn name out your motherfucking mouth. So the Hood is the ship for the Royal Navy, but she did have some limitations, specifically an outdated armor, which was vulnerable to plunging fire. You see, older battleships didn't have to deal with plunging fire, which is when the shells are coming in at a steep angle as opposed to coming horizontally directly at the side of the boat, like with older cannon fire. Guns capable of such trajectories were a very recent development in 1935. So the Hood is scheduled for rearmament, but the Brits are too broke and too busy fucking up Nazi containment to get to the work on Hood, so the Hood enters World War II service without the crucial armor upgrade, and that brings us up to speed to May 1941. So Hood and Prince of Wales are steaming north, and they intercept the Bismarck and her convoy southwest of Iceland. Once the warships have closed the distance between them and the Germans to 13 miles, Hood opens fire on the lead vessel, assuming, based on traditional naval doctrine, that the bigger, more powerful Bismarck would be leading. But the Germans have defied convention, and Prince Eugen is leading. With the element of surprise spent, Prince of Wales notices the error and opens up her guns on the Bismarck. But the German guns do not immediately fire. You see, whatever else will happen this day, being found by the Brits is a Big Ben-sized wrench in their plans to break into the Atlantic and become the boogeyman of merchant sailors from Nova Scotia to Gibraltar. And the Germans are pissed. The element of surprise is gone, but they have no choice. Prince Eugen and the Bismarck open fire on Hood and Prince of Wales, and the Battle of Denmark Straits is officially on. Mere moments after fighting commences, the Kriegsmarine aboard Bismarck acquire range on Hood and sink a 15-inch shell into one of her forward ready-use compartments. Prince of Wales lands a few shots on Bismarck, but just like COVID, the shots don't do anything. Worse yet, the Prince of Wales was rushed out of port by the Brits like Tesla unveiling a pickup truck. Everything looked good on the outside, but don't throw a rock at anything. Specifically, her experimental 4-gun turrets had left port before they were operational and only had been brought up to operational status directly before the battle. Still, after every few salvos, another one of Prince of Wales' guns develops an issue and falls silent. Shortly after the first hit on Hood, Bismarck lands 2 more direct hits, one to her upper tower and one to her forward deck. The latter was the exact type of plunging fire her armor was known to be vulnerable against. The 15-inch shell easily penetrates the deck, finds its way into the main magazine, and detonates. The resulting explosion was catastrophic. Men on the Prince of Wales watch in horror as the pride of the Royal Navy heaves from the water and breaks in two, her forward section continuing on under its own momentum for a bit, before it sinks beneath the waves with the aft. She sinks in 3 minutes. There were 1,400 men aboard the HMS Hood during the Battle of the Denmark Straits. Only 3 would be pulled from the water. But the men aboard the Prince of Wales don't have time to mourn their fallen comrades, or the loss of the Hood, or even to process fully what happened, for in the chaos, they have sailed directly into the spot Hood was in when she was hit. The Germans don't even have to adjust their range. Prince of Wales begins taking heavy fire. So at this point, outnumbered, outgunned, and outclassed, Prince of Wales makes the call to break from the fight. She, along with 2 cruisers, Norfolk and Suffolk, decide to tail Bismarck and Prince Eugen far enough back that they can keep them within radar contact, but not close enough that they're within visual contact. Now, telling this story here, this decision makes a ton of sense, but Churchill was so angry, he tried to have the captain court-martialed right there on the spot, even though one of those shells that Eugen and Bismarck fired at Prince of Wales after the Hood sank went directly through the bridge, destroying every single thing in there and killing everyone except for the captain and 1 other guy. So the British are terrified. If the Germans make it to the Atlantic, they essentially own that part of the playground in perpetuity. And worse yet, the loss of the Hood was an absolute crushing blow to British morale. But this wasn't just war anymore. The Germans had touched the wrong boat. And the Brits would avenge the Hood. If it took every ship, sailor, and plane on the sea, they would have their revenge, dry and on toast. But for now, Bismarck was safe, and while she didn't take any crucial hits, Prince of Wales did knock a few lines off her health bar. Specifically, one of Prince of Wales' 13-inch shells made its way directly through the bow section of the Bismarck, flooding a few watertight compartments and severing her forward fuel tanks from the rest of the ship. What this did was leave the Bismarck doing a kind of Hansel and Gretel meets Exxon Valdez thing as it steamed through the North Atlantic, leaving a visible trail of oil behind it. So Hood is lost and Prince of Wales is jacked up but floating and following the Bismarck to try to keep within radar distance. Now, unfortunately, while Bismarck was on her first combat mission, her crew was not. Captain Ernst Linderman and Admiral Gunther Lugens, I'm aware that I'm not getting anywhere near the correct pronunciation for these German names, but I am having a good time trying, were aboard Bismarck and were experienced at sea, and they knew exactly how to evade enemy ships. Long story short, what Bismarck did was this 6-spin move where it kind of circles outside the radar range and then comes back around on its own trail and goes a different direction, and it's gone before the ships ever know what happened or are able to get it back on radar. That's exactly what Bismarck did. Disappeared like a fart in the wind. Tovey is pissed. Churchill is apoplectic. It looks like Bismarck has slipped free of them and is going to be able to do whatever it wants to whoever it wants all over the Atlantic. And that probably would have been true. The Bismarck probably would have remained out of the reach of British hands. They just stayed off the damn radio. The codebreakers at Bletchley Park intercepted and interpreted a message between Bismarck and High Command. Specifically, the conversation went like this. Hey, I'm a big German commander and my son's on the Bismarck. Where's he headed? Oh, we're headed to Brest, France to make some repairs from what that stupid British boat did to us. Oh, cool, I guess I'll tell Junior I'll see him in Brest, France. Ad Wiedersehen, or whatever they say in France. Where previously the Brits had no idea if Bismarck was heading back to Denmark, south, west. Now we know, occupied France. Now it's about this time when the Bismarck is again sighted, this time by the US Coast Guard cutter Modoc. Modoc sees the boat off in the distance, gets the note to Tovey, and Tovey launches 2 Lend-Lease PBY flying boats to try to make visual contact with the Bismarck. Interesting story about the PBYs, keep in mind this is 1941. They were flown by American Navy pilots with British pilots in the co-pilot seat in a trainee position. And if you're thinking, don't remember personnel being part of Lend-Lease, you'd be right. Roosevelt went way out on a limb sending Americans to fight in combat positions before a congressional declaration of war. And if you're thinking, wow, this one singular instance of FDR overstepping the constitutional bounds of the office he occupies is wild, don't look into the rest of his presidency. The only thing that got FDR out of office was death. Old Wheelies McMarried his cousin wasn't a president, he was a emperor. But I think all that FDR hatred is probably a story for another day. Back to the Bismarck, which again was in British sights, with ships closing in from all over the Atlantic, specifically Tovey's home fleet from Scapa Flow and Force H, a flotilla that was stationed in Gibraltar. One of the ships sailing with Force H is the HMS Victorious, a carrier with a complement of torpedo bombers. And I know you heard torpedo bombers, but that's not what I meant. The Victorious was carrying these things, the Fairley Swordfish, 1930s biplane technology, strapped with 1 torpedo each. They were old and they were slow, like mom drank while pregnant slow. So Victorious launches 9 of these things as soon as she comes within range of the Bismarck, and they execute an absolute textbook torpedo run on the HMS Sheffield. Some in McHale's Navy shit, for real, my God. Yeah, remember how I told you ships were pouring in from all over the Atlantic to help hunt for Uncle Addie's now leaking massive financial investment? Well, one of those was the cruiser, the Sheffield, and the pilots from the Victorious, all new hires, this is their first sortie, mistook the silhouette of the Sheffield for the silhouette of the Bismarck, and they torpedoed the heck out of it. Thankfully, I guess, depending on how you look at it, the brand new magnetic detonator torpedoes that the Royal Navy had given them all failed. 100% failure rate. Yes, this was a potentially tragic event averted, but it also represents one chance completely squandered to stop this ship, because if it makes it back to safety in occupied France, the Brits can't do anything. They can monitor it, try to wait for it to leave again, but this mission is a failure. Fortunately for the Brits, another carrier, the HMS Ark Royal from Tovey's home fleet, soon comes within range of the Bismarck so that she can launch her complement of Swordfish to take their turn to try to slow down the Titanic warship. I think pun intended on that one, I'm not sure. It's worth noting 2 very odd quirks of the Swordfish, which ended up working in the Brits' favor. Number 1, these things were slow, I already told you. So slow, in fact, that the anti-aircraft guns, which had been timed to aim at their much faster contemporary counterparts, would just overshoot them almost 100% of the time. The guys couldn't even come close to these slow-ass biplanes. And number 2, they had these short, super fat wings, which created excessive lift for such a small little plane. The upshot there is that the wings and the fuselage of these planes could take a remarkable amount of anti-aircraft fire and stay in the air, which is a plus when you're attempting an attack run on the world's most powerful ship. Now, there are some great first-hand stories from the Swordfish pilots, which I am painfully omitting for time. Here's what's going to be on the quiz. As the planes approach, Bismarck's anti-aircraft guns erupt. Though taking heavy fire, none of the Swordfish are down. All of them drop their payload. Bismarck takes evasive maneuvers to avoid the tin fish in the water. One of the 17-inch torpedoes, now fitted with the old-style contact detonator, hits Bismarck in her starboard aft corner and detonates. Watertight compartments are breached. But far worse, her fully extended rudders are jammed in position, leaving Bismarck circling. Now, if you didn't catch that, I'll explain it another way. You know the fat electrician's theory that Star Wars is based on World War II? Well, this is the Death Star blowing up moment. These newly trained pilots are flying small, outdated planes whose fire has zero effect on the massive enemy ship, until one British pilot, conceivably with the ghost of Admiral Nelson in his ear, finds a womp rat-sized soft spot and lands a torpedo straight down Bismarck's air shaft. I mean, rudder. Now, Bismarck doesn't blow up, but it is disabled, circling, helpless, but not defenseless. So Bismarck, having left Prince Eugen and the rest of her convoy to seek repairs in occupied France, is now alone in the middle of the Atlantic doing her best NASCAR routine, just sort of doing circles. And objectively, one of the most hilarious parts of this otherwise tragic story is the account of the destroyer Pion Run. This small Polish destroyer was actually the first ship to find Bismarck after the debilitating Swordfish attack on the night of May 26th. Pion Run's small 4.7-inch guns wouldn't even be enough to rock the boat hard enough to disrupt the officer's nightly Jaeger bombs, but still, as the Pion Run sails past, she fires 3 defiant Polish salvos at the circling German ship, and on her signal light flashes, "I am a Pole." And if you don't understand why that's my favorite part of this story, this channel's not for you. I'm super sorry to have wasted so much of your time. As the 26th turns into the 27th, the British are closing in both from the north and the south. With the Bismarck confined to her defiant circles, the Brits can take her any way they want. Tovey chooses 4-way. His plan is to surround the battleship, draw her fire, and destroy. Tovey arrives with his flagship, a brand new Washington-compliant battleship, the HMS King George V, and the HMS Rodney, an ancient battleship, but heavily armored with pre-treaty 16-inch guns. Additionally, the heavy cruisers Dorsetshire and Norfolk would be there to provide support.
Early on the morning of May 26th, Tovey's hit squad rolls up on the limping Bismarck. Like Peter, Samir, and Michael ready to beat the bricks off a malfunctioning fax machine, the 4 ships surround the Bismarck and begin their barrage of 14 and 16-inch shells. Basically, this Bavarian brick shithouse is floating, fine, albeit uncontrollable and ultimately stationary, but her guns? They were flying high, fine as wine, having themselves a big and rich time. And Admiral Lugens had promised in his final transmission, while the ship was unmaneuverable, that they would fight to the last shell. Also, long live the Fuhrer, friggin' sycophant. So shells are flying in all directions. Bismarck is focusing all of her fire on the old-ass Rodney. Same thing she did with the Hood, which is age discrimination and kind of a dick move, but ultimately it doesn't matter because Bismarck became a coral reef while Rodney became the flagship of the whole damn Royal Navy later on. Kind of illustrates the magnitude of losses that the Royal Navy took during the war, but we're so close to the end of this video. Let's just stay on track here. Long story short, Tovey's ships exchange fire with Bismarck for close to an hour until King George V acquires range, brackets Bismarck, and lands direct hits on her upper tower and her gunnery control. And I don't know, man, directly after these 2 hits, either the Admiral ran out of shells or, I don't know, maybe he was lying to the Fuhrer earlier because the Bismarck falls silent.
It's at this point that the Germans left on board the Bismarck decide today is just not our day, and the order is given to set scuttling charges, open the sea valves, and abandon ship. But the Brits are not having it. No. You don't get to sink the Hood and then rage quit on your own terms. Tovey's orders were to sink this thing, not let it be scuttled. So the Dorsetshire moves into position, fires 3 21-inch torpedoes into the hull of Bismarck, and at 10:39 a.m., Bismarck sinks by the stern. At the end of the day, Tovey's ships have fired over 2,800 shells at the German battleship, with 400 making contact. Of Bismarck's 2,090-man crew, only 115 would survive the day, including 1,400 souls lost with the Hood and 13 other British casualties occurring during the fighting. Over 3,300 brave sailors have given their lives, and both Britain and the Third Reich have lost massive symbols of national pride and prestige. There is some debate over whether or not it was the torpedoes from the Dorsetshire or the sabotaging efforts by the German which finally put the Bismarck underneath the waves, but I propose this to you. If I burn down your house, make it 90% unlivable, so you go ahead and bulldoze the smoldering frame. You didn't destroy your house. I did. Now, as far as further impacts on the war, it's no secret that
I cannot tell you how exhausting it is trying to come up with alternate things to call this man so that YouTube won't flag my video. Let's go with Mean Mr. Munster. Any Beatles fans out there?
Mean Mr. Munster was not a fan of capital ships like the Hood and the Bismarck in the first place. He thought they were too expensive, too vulnerable, and their loss was too public. It hurt too much. And he wasn't wrong
about that. He wasn't wrong about that.
The Brits learned that with the Hood, the Germans learned it with the Bismarck, the Japanese learned it with the Yamato, and we, the Americans, learned it with the, You know what? That's crazy. We actually kept the Iowa on the right side of the waves through the whole war. I think it's actually still floating, rusting somewhere in Virginia. Imagine that. And that is everything that I have to tell you about the Bismarck. Really very little to report since May 1941, with the exception of Bob Ballard finding the wreck in 1989. I don't think that was the same expedition where he found the Titanic and was really looking for nuclear submarines. That whole thing's a story for another day. It doesn't really matter, because this one is done. Hey, before you go, I'm actually out here looking for a spot where I can bury all the extra material that I had for this video that didn't quite make the cut. Specifically, I found some pretty interesting facts on Bismarck that just didn't fit into the video without making it 3 hours long. So if you'd like to see a bonus facts video, that'll be open in a few days. Spoiler alert, the United States nuked, mushroom cloud, the whole thing, one of the ships we discussed in this video. That doesn't pique your interest, I don't know what will. Thank you so much for watching. As mentioned, video not yet monetized, so if you'd like to see more of these videos more frequently, subscribe, tell your friends, share the video. Thanks so much. Catch y'all on the next one. I need to get the heck out of these woods. The Jersey Devil's been stalking me for 3 days. I think I smell them catching up.